Alternative Reality, Volume 1, Chapter 6. It was night when Luke finally crawled out of his capsule like a corpse out of a grave. Although he didn't exactly feel tired, but long immersion sessions like that did take their toll on the head. Dizzy, Luke was feeling its full brunt as he limped over to bed only to fall into it like a man dying, and fell asleep within moments. He didn't get far, did he? Like any self-respecting person bent on a healthy lifestyle, or so Luke liked to tell himself, he slept for a solid 8 hours before wakefulness dragged him back to the land of the living. Then, unusually for him, he took a shower, shaved, and even groomed his neglected scalp, doing his best to angle what hair remained in a way that made it seem less sad. Hard to say if his efforts brought any worthwhile results. Since his appearance no longer correlated with what he looked like in alternative reality, this unexpected care could only mean one thing. He wasn't planning on diving back into the capsule anytime soon. Instead, Luke decided to make a few stops outside. As far as he knew, high-level quests or adventures would often demand quite a bit of time and dedication. Thus, it was only logical to sort any headaches in his real life before diving back in. Well, unless he went and died within the first few hours in-game. Then he'd have plenty of time on his hands outside the game. Too much, if he sorted all the real-life stuff before that. Scratching his scalp, Luke had quite a conundrum on his hands. Going back to his grandiose plans, if we took a standard working weekday, using our ever-busy Luke as an example, his day would consist of sleep, eat, work, sleep. Simply taking away all the sleep was not an option at all. After all, alternative reality wasn't the most pleasant experience if one was too tired. Thus, he decided to sort the two remaining components of his bag-breakingly difficult life. Almost like a 2-for-1 sale. Luke smiled at himself in the mirror, no doubt excessively satisfied with his ingenious plan. That smile quickly twisted into a frown, and the suddenly grumpy fellow walked off and took a mental note to remind himself to never smile at himself in the mirror again, for the sake of his own mental health. Moving on, today's schedule would involve eat, annoy innocent hard-working individuals, and finish his weekly quota. Maybe barely escape with his teeth intact. A busy day before an exciting event. Considering that if things go well, he won't be free for at least 2 straight days. If he'll manage to binge the game for that long. God knows he'll try. He dressed casually. Blue skinny jeans, a white long-sleeve shirt, the 2 top buttons undone, and a black t-shirt underneath. Amazing sense of style. Thought nobody ever. Except Luke, of course, judging by that confident gait of his. It wasn't often that he could dress up like that, and today the weather seemed just perfect for the occasion. Warm enough for there to be no need for a jacket, and cool enough for just 2 layers of clothing. Destination? Downtown, at least 6 blocks away from his apartment. Considering that he visited quite a few spots over the course of his employment, Luke had to travel far. He didn't want to end up being recognized, or bump into anyone he previously annoyed, after all. Why risk any unwelcome and unexpected injuries or accidents? He eventually ended up in a neat little outdoor cafe. Not too costly, calm, mostly female personnel, which meant a lesser chance of getting his legs broken or anything of the sort. Time for action. Luke awkwardly ordered a cup of green tea, 4 different buns, and today's breakfast, bacon and eggs. Original. Later, he'd need to make sure he's not in some American neighborhood, after dealing with the complaints from his blood vessels about some risk of blockage or whatever. Being the needy customer that he was, Luke made sure to request that his tea, together with the buns, would be brought in after his main course of bacon and eggs was finished. Another one of his steps to being nominated as the most annoying customer of the year. Once the main course was here, with no hurry in sight, he ate away with little worry, observing the waitresses and the guests. Slowly, he could feel himself sinking into melancholy at the sight. He still felt uncomfortable outside of his quiet little sanctuary, like he was somehow out of place, like he didn't belong. As if he was in some giant scheme with everyone in on the joke and Luke as the butt of it. As if a thick layer of glass separated him from everyone else, like he was on the outside, observing, alone. Sometimes they'd look back at him, more often with disdain than curiosity, treating him like the strange one, the odd one out, as they say. A natural train of thought, all things considering. Luke was pretty strange after all. This seemed like a nice little place though. Everyone was lost in their own little thing, busy with that hectic life of theirs. Until they need to order. By the looks of it, the staff also looked like an okay bunch of people. Feigned interest and politeness, sure, but it was much worse in other places. This almost made him feel bad about causing trouble. A job was a job, though. Nothing personal, as his classmates used to say, while stuffing his things into a garbage can. Seemed quite personal to Luke, though, considering that only his belongings would receive such attention. With the breakfast course finished, Luke waited for the remainder of his order while looking at his mobile phone. 10 minutes. That's how long he had to wait until it arrived. Not too long, normally he wouldn't care. He was working now, though. Thus he was forced to be picky. Forced. That's the excuse he enjoyed using. Circumstances forced his hand, with him having barely anything to do with it. A liberating thought, truly. During his younger days, Luke experienced an overabundance of attention directed at him, and grew up with a strange habit. A habit of putting on a show as if everyone was watching him, as if he was constantly under scrutiny, or at the very least, paid attention to. It would prove somewhat useful in this particular situation, though in most cases it just received a weird eye. Quite reasonably so. It was hard to say if Luke was just used to acting like he was at the center of attention, or simply always tried to end up there without even realizing, like trying to fit into the same old familiar shoes, or to feed an oversized and ever-hungry ego. Maybe we'll find out one day. Either way, the show was on. Luke lifted the teacup to his lips, took a sip, stopped, and with a furrowed brow glared at the poor inanimate object. Obviously, he was dissatisfied with something. Luke then placed the teacup back from whence it came, directing his attention at the buns instead. He moved them around, once, twice, a third time for good measure, and then furrowed his brows again. Luckily, by now the waitress noticed his act and walked right into it. Today was Luke's lucky day. He got a catch. It was almost heartwarming to find out that someone was actually paying attention to him, even if they got paid for it. "Excuse me? Is something wrong?" she asked politely, giving Luke a reproachful look. Over the years, Luke realized that he is only comfortable with other people when the feeling of superiority is present, when he finds himself in a better position, or is somehow leading the conversation. When he isn't feeling vulnerable, in other words. Being socially awkward, it was unlikely that, under normal circumstances, Luke would lead a conversation anytime soon. Which only left the former as an option. And in the service market, everyone knew that the customer was always right. Even if that customer was a rude, overly entitled, obnoxious guy with an inferiority complex like Luke. Thus, being right, Luke felt comfortable enough to be the most annoying customer he could manage. And being in this role was the final layer that helped him completely shake away the social anxiety. The mind worked in mysterious ways. Yes, there is. He shifted the teacup towards the waitress. What is this? She raised one eyebrow. A cup of green tea, sir. Funny. Guess it will turn into a battle of wits. Suddenly, he felt the worn t-shirt cling to his back as he began sweating heavily. Yes, but I ordered black tea, Luke replied curtly, while continuously staring at the poor victim. Sir, I'm positively sure you asked for green tea, the waitress replied after a few seconds of fidgeting, shaken by such an insignificant issue. Good. The conversation was going into a cliché argument, one which Luke practiced quite a bit, inside his head mostly. At least 100 times. He felt prepared for this. No, I always ordered black tea. I doubt this was an exception. But if it was only the tea, I wouldn't have bothered. Look here, Luke continued, tapping his finger at the plate of buns. I also ordered one cinnamon bun, one with strawberry filling, one with caramel, and one with raspberry. Do you see any buns with raspberry filling? A barely visible smirk. He got her. The waitress looked at the plate, at her notebook, at the plate again. She was lost. But sir, I don't see it written down in my notebook. The raspberry bun, I mean. She fidgeted. Attempts at finding an excuse, an escape. Luke was familiar with that mindset. He got an easier mark. She was obviously new, not used to the job. Not used to troublesome, frustrated, and always unhappy customers, like Luke. He won. It went down quite easily after that. The shift manager was called over. After a brief discussion, the waitress apologized to Luke, and he got his second part of the meal for free. Didn't make him feel like a better person. On the contrary, situations like these usually served as ignition, starting a never-ending self-pity marathon inside his head. But the usual thought process was interrupted by a sudden disturbance. Didn't this happen before, somewhere? Quite randomly, a girl sat down on the opposite side of the table, and Luke froze up with his mouth wide open, a bun held merely an inch away from it. It wasn't her beauty that made him freeze up like that, surprisingly, but the fact that this was completely unexpected, and Luke had a hard time dealing with the unexpected. When things didn't go as planned, Luke always felt lost and was slow to react. Don't get him wrong though, she was beautiful. Medium-length dark hair, light makeup, delicate features. Probably in her 20s, though who could tell these days really. She was dressed neatly, but stylishly, although in this day and age it wasn't exactly uncommon. Everyone liked to look stylish and modern. Everyone wanted to attract attention, and nobody wanted to be excluded from social circles because of a poor impression. Something seemed off though. There were plenty types of beautiful. Refined beauty, cold beauty, and a number of others that Luke couldn't exactly come up with. Such things were beyond his reach, so he spent little time thinking about it, unless put on the spot. Even knowing that, however, Luke was pretty sure that this particular girl would be considered as an insane beauty. Not that her beauty itself was insane, oh no, she herself seemed slightly insane. A weird glimmer in the eye that somehow signaled every nerve in Luke's body to stay away. Danger. Which was made even more difficult when she was exactly his type. Slim, dark, and a little gloomy. Just enough to make him feel as if the two could relate on many things. Ah, wishful thinking. How cute. All in all, the whole situation made him feel terribly uncomfortable. So much that he slightly shifted in his chair as if he wanted to run away outright, yet forgetting to close his mouth or move the bun out of the way. Back to being awkward, it seemed. Hard to say what exactly made his mask crumble so quickly, but it could have been a number of things. His lack of experience with the fairer sex? An unexpected situation? Aversion to people he didn't know? What the fuck? She finally said, after a long pause, arms crossed, an angry, even cold glare. What a way to start a conversation. This won't go well, will it? Little by little, Luke could feel himself getting more and more confused and lost in how to react to this particular development. He never had a conversation like this before, not quite. Everything was crumbling around him, but at least he managed to close his mouth, even if the bun was still forgotten. Maybe he was stuck debating if this was a good time to finish it, after all. You think I haven't noticed you following me around? First that bakery across the street, then the mall, the shoe store, and now even here, 6 blocks away, she continued, steadily flaring up, her upper body leaning ever closer to Luke. Now, mind the social distance. Luke was starting to feel exceptionally uncomfortable, and the fact that multiple unfriendly stares were assaulting his position didn't help at all. He could almost feel unpleasant memories slowly crawling up from whatever corner of his mind Luke had stuffed them in. How much more fucking obvious can you get? Grow some balls already. Can't even say hi to a neighbor, but stalking me all over the city doesn't seem as hard? Seriously? The monologue was getting way out of hand. Neighbor? Suddenly, Luke looked more closely at this overbearing girl. Sure, she wasn't dressed all in black this time, but it was surely her. This foul-mouthed, one-sided decision-making torture. His neighbor, with whom he never even exchanged a greeting. Maybe a short glance at each other, sure. Nothing beyond that, though. It's true that they usually left their apartments at the same time, but it was all a strange coincidence. Yet it turned into a huge misunderstanding and was being blown out of all proportions. A spark of outrage sprang to life within him, bringing some measure of clarity. This was when Luke finally noticed the bun. Slowly, he placed it back on the table. About damn time. If I find you following me around again, I swear I'll call the cops on you. Creep. With a shout, she finally ended the monologue, got up, gave him another angry glance, and stormed off. That reminded Luke of a song he liked, and he quickly decided to listen to it once back home. And it was about time to go. Especially so after noting how everyone else glared at him now. As if the words of a single random stranger were enough proof for that title to stick and make him public enemy number 1 or something. Yup, the sooner he left, the better. His spine tensed from frustration. How unfair the situation was. He was just minding his own business, only for her to come in and make it all about her. Storming in like a fury, throwing around baseless accusations. Well, almost baseless. Coincidences were a scary thing. Yet she waved those flawed conclusions like some royal flag, and here Luke was, left having to bear the brunt of all that resentment from everyone, even though he wasn't at fault. Even though he didn't do anything wrong. Well, almost anything. He was quite the obnoxious customer just a moment ago, after all. Whatever. The buns were really good, though. which was probably why he had the nerve to finish them without paying much heed to all the stairs. Not saying he didn't mind, on the contrary, disliking the situation would be a gentle way to describe it. He might be used to such developments, yet he hated them all the same. He could almost feel an unpleasant burning sensation down in his very gut, and if he believed strongly enough that it's in the stomach, food helped keep it on the down low. Those buns were just at the right time, at the right place. What a day. Luke returned home soon after, stopping at a few shops to vent on the way. His weekly quota was almost done, and he could now spend the rest of his time in alternative reality. All that needed to be done now was get some sleep, and he was ready for adventure. If that dungeon was actually explored, it would serve as quite a punch to the teeth, though. Topping on the cake, so to speak. A fruity, gelatin-filled cheesecake, the sort he absolutely despised. As Luke climbed up the stairs towards his apartment, another unwelcome development awaited him. Seems like it was becoming a trend. If light keeps it up, Luke might just start avoiding going outside altogether. Bearing with the heavy glare coming his way from his aggressive neighbor, Luke realized that the two must have come home at basically the same time. Another coincidence, but only Luke knew that. Creep, was all she said before slamming the door behind her, ending this one-sided day with a one-sided statement. What a day indeed. He really wanted to listen to that song though. But I'm a creep. I'm a weirdo. He hummed under his nose.